Have you found yourself frustrated by the fact that you have to repeat instructions over and over again because students miss them? Do you feel there's a disconnect between what you want the students to do and what they actually do? Let's take a look at how our brains operate and see what connections we can find between this problem and a solution. A study at the University of Rochester found that visual processing skills increase with as little as 10 hours of gameplay. Tests have further shown that people can remember the content of over 2,500 pictures with 90% accuracy several days after exposure, even though they see each picture for only 10 seconds. Recall rates after 1 year remain at about 63%. The same research, however, shows that when information is presented orally, after 72 hours, people only remember about 10%. Add picture content to the material, however, and the retention skyrockets up to 65%. With the simple addition of supporting visuals, you could increase students' retention by as much as 650%. And this is because the brain processes images 60,000 times faster than it does text. Our brains are designed for visual content. Of our total nerve cells in the brain, 30% are dedicated to sight, while only 8% are for touch and a mere 3% for hearing. Our visual is 10 times our hearing. So why do we place so much emphasis on delivering communication through auditory means? It's important to understand how we operate in life. How are we wired as we look at things around us? Depending on what intelligences are my strengths will decide how I view and understand things around me. For an example, if I'm very high in visual, spatial intelligence and low in verbal linguistic, being presented something in textual form will not help me in my learning, or at least have a lasting understanding. In Tomlinson 2009 research, it tells us it's important to take into account students' multiple intelligences. Also, I need to position myself in situations of learning that fit my learning style, or I will struggle in my learning and understanding. We need to teach this to our students also and to help them define whether they are visual, auditory, or physical. So, what do all these research results have to do with my research? Being visual like we are, why do we communicate through auditory means so much? Put yourself in the typical classroom and think about what you would observe. The teacher stands up front or at the door and gives directions to the students. Lessons are given through textual and auditory means. Why do we do it this way? Let me tell you about a story of 5 apes. And in their cage was placed a ladder, a stairway, and above the stairway was hung some bananas. And when the first ape approached the stairway to get the bananas, when he touched the stairway, you take a fire hose and fire all of the apes, all 5 of them, with freezing cold water and drive that ape back. And then another ape decides to try and goes over and goes for the bananas, and you do it again. Well, pretty soon, the next time an ape goes near that stairway, the other apes go over and beat it up, until finally none of them are going to go near the stairway. So now you replace the first ape with a new ape. Well, that new ape sees the bananas and heads over, but just when it's about to touch the stairway, the apes beat it up. But this time you make a change. You don't spray them with that cold water. Well, again, when that ape tries again, they beat it up, even though there's been no cold water. So then you replace another ape with a new ape. And before long, you find that when the new ape tries to go near the stairway, not only do the 3 older apes attack it, but the first newer ape also attacks, even though it has no idea why. And you continue to do the replacement till all 5 apes have been replaced. And in the meantime, what happens is that each time they attack the other apes, even though they have no idea why they're doing it. So in the end, none of them are going to approach the stairway. So the question we need to ask is, as far as the apes in the cage know, well, that's just the way we do things around here. Tawadi, that's the way we've always done it. We do things auditorily because that's the way we've seen it done. That's the way our teachers we had did it. But is this the right way to do it? The tools that I used during my cycles were, I used my teacher website through communication. I used ScreenFlow tutorials. I had review lessons online. I had an animated PowerPoint, student response system, and as you see in the movie, music transitions so that the students knew when to change. With the animated PowerPoint, I was able to put up to 5 different directions, and in doing so, the students responded very well in following the PowerPoint. Since my cycles have ended, I've realized there are other tools I can use, including building an e-learning from Udubto project on different subjects, student-created webcasts where they teach the lesson, the highest form of learning. Comic Life is an ideal tool. Using students' own pictures, they really key in on that and put directions on there, and they definitely see them. Using Moodle, an online course management system, and also using iWeb or some other form of website first, but have students create the website giving communication. My PowerPoint was probably my biggest thing that I use, the animated PowerPoint. Now I say animated because I never had the words just sit there. I had them flow in from different directions, and the reason was that it caught the students' eyes. When directions were given through this medium, at least 90% of the students responded successfully on a daily basis. I found that 5 different directions could be followed at one time successfully. I probably could have done more, but there wasn't room on the slide. The students were more attentive to what was given and completed everything without any verbal auditory promptings. In looking at the responses from the survey, the students felt the same way as my observations. 80% felt they would rather have directions communicated through PowerPoint most of the time. Only 7% of the students didn't like the use of PowerPoint. What was interesting is the importance of where you place the text on the slide as seen by their preferences. About 10% of my students didn't see the PowerPoint even though it's flashing away and continually missed it. When I asked them about it, they suggested a change in the background color and the placement of the text. I did change it to a black background with a red text, and for most of the 10%, I saw improvement, and the other 90% continued to see it. The tutorials, the data shows that more than 95% of the students felt the tutorials helped them understand what they were doing most or all of the time. What surprised me most was the fact that over 72% of the students watched some of the tutorials more than once. Add to the fact 15% of those students watched every video tutorial more than once. Normally, at least for 5th graders, doing something again is not something they would choose. What stood out most here and was unexpected was the fact that 85% of the students felt more confident in themselves in what they were doing when communication came through technology. And 80% felt class went more smoothly because of this. Finally, when it comes to what is easier, communicating directions through technology or audibly, 88% felt they would rather have it delivered through technology. On the negative side, not to my research, but to other practices, 28% are frustrated most of the time when communication is given audibly, and overall, 90% are frustrated at least partially. In my second cycle, I continued looking for the longevity of these tools to see if there would be a change or the students continue to pay attention and use the tools. In looking at the data, I found the students felt it was very important that every teacher have a website for communication and web links. 85% felt that this was very, very important. When I asked the question about how many had used my website outside of class, and this was interesting, just about the same number, 84%, used it as the ones who felt every teacher should have a website. I feel these percents correlate with each other. 96% felt that teachers' websites make the classroom run easier most to all of the time. Overall, the surveys have shown that giving communication through auditory means is not a preferred way for all students today. They enjoy the chance that technology provides to be able to go back and make sure of what they're doing. Also, because it's not on paper, it catches their eye and holds their attention. And I've observed this over and over again. They also enjoyed the music transition tools very much, and it made them feel more comfortable. They knew how long the time was and knew what they needed to do. In the Missed It section that I had on my website, it was designed for students who are absent, or maybe they didn't quite get it and I could send them to the computer and they could go over it again. It helped them very much to take a look at it. And I didn't have this on as long because it was in the second cycle, but even in that short period of time, I'm amazed how many used it and got involved in it.
Michelle, we've been doing this research all year, dealing with how to improve instructional communication using technology and comparing it to the traditional way of basically auditory. What are your thoughts about this, having been involved in this research all year?
Using technology communication instead of verbal has worked a lot better for me, and I think my classmates would agree. Well, the PowerPoint is better than verbal because you can look at it many times over. It keeps flashing up there. You can see it. Well, if you were to tell it to us verbally, then a lot of people would forget or get off task. So, looking at that, you can go back and see what you're supposed to do. In the tutorials online, if you don't know what to go to, you can watch them as many times as you want to. And I have used the Missed It section on your website a few times when I've been gone from school. So.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Well, we get an hour every day for that. And usually if the teacher decides to do it auditory, that means you're using 15 minutes or more trying to explain it and then take all the questions versus have it up on the screen, we can just read it, come down, we know what we're doing, and work on it, and we get it done faster and you don't have to spend a lot of time explaining it. That's a very helpful thing. That means you can get more into the day than sitting around talking, no, it's this, I'm sorry, and take all the questions, all that stuff. And it's a big time saver.
Now you've heard from those who benefit the most. I'd like to conclude my presentation with this quote taken from Understanding the Digital Generation, written by Ian Jukes, an internationally renowned educational speaker, known as the Committed Sardine. He says, no other sector ignores its own research as much as education. We know that teaching as talking doesn't work. We know that project-based learning is dramatically more effective in helping students to learn and retain information. We now know a lot about why kids act, learn, and view the world differently than we do. Yet sadly, little of what we know is being applied to classroom instruction today. Over 50% of grade 9 students in the 35 largest cities in the United States don't graduate. Would you fly in an airplane if 50% of them crashed? Would you buy a television that only works half the time? Why do we tolerate such massive failure in our educational system? What education is doing today isn't working. If we continue to do what we know doesn't work, then who really has the learning problem? Is it the students or is it us? What are you prepared to do starting right now? In conclusion, in looking at these facts, it becomes apparent that the way things have been done in the past need to change. If the students are to be successful in the classroom, technology must be used for communication. When we look historically, people in the 30s and 50s were very auditory in nature because that is how they learned. People sat and listened to the radio and talked together. In the 1960s, television came along and we became a mix of auditory and visual learners. More of our social life revolved around the television. With the advent of the internet and our digital multimedia world today, students are upwards of 90% visual kinesthetic. That is why I believe my research was successful. It met the students right where they are at today. As professionals, we need to seek best practice in all that we do, and that includes using communication through technology in the classroom.